is on course to construct over 40,000 housing units in its new administrative capital by the middle of 2020. Details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Ramah, thank you. And we begin with the latest on the Ethiopian Airlines crash. French investigators have received the black boxes from the fatal flight on Sunday, which killed 157 passengers. It is hoped that a readout from flight data and cockpit voice recorders will reveal why the Boeing 737 MAX 800 fell from the sky. CGTN's Paris correspondent Oliver Whitfield-Michuk reports.
Investigators are now going to start working to get the information stored on hard drives inside these black boxes. The machines were delivered to the officers of the French Air Accident Investigation Agency known as the BEA on Thursday. A spokesman has told me it could take anywhere between 12 hours and a couple of days to retrieve the data, all depending on the condition of the recorders. Although they are called black boxes, the machines are actually fluorescent orange to make them easier to find in the event of a plane crash. One device is dedicated to recording the voices of the pilots during the flight, and the other contains data relating to how the plane systems performed. The boxes are built to withstand the intense flames and huge pressures associated with air accidents. The machines had been due to be sent to Germany for analysis, but investigators there cannot process the new type of recorder being used in the Boeing 737 MAX airplane. Ethiopia's Civil Aviation Authority has taken the lead role in this investigation into the fatal crash of Flight 302. They are receiving assistance from US bodies, the National Transportation Safety Board and the Federal Aviation Administration. Those organizations, including plane manufacturer Boeing, engine makers General Electric and Safran, plus Ethiopian Airlines, will all play a part in the investigation to find out why this plane crashed, resulting in the deaths of 157 people. Oliver Whitfield-Michuk, CGTN, Paris.
Meanwhile, grief has given way to frustration for relatives of the Ethiopian Airlines crash victims. Mourners continue to flock to the site of the disaster, some of them wailing and beating their chests, others picking through the rubble for a sign from any of the 157 people who died when the plane plunged to the ground on Sunday. Many are complaining about the investigation's slow pace and lack of transparency. The brother of an Israeli victim has appealed to Ethiopia's Prime Minister to allow specialists from his country to assist with search and rescue operations.
I'm asking you directly, Mr. Prime Minister, to let the special teams to work till we will find the remains that we can bring both of them to the graves in Israel. Big families, a lot of people, full Israeli nations waiting for these remains, and we will not go out from this country, Ethiopia, until we will find these remains to bury them, because if not, they will stay missing for the rest of their life, and we cannot do it in our religious.
In South Africa, the country's Civil Aviation Authority has indicated that it will continue to lend support to the Ethiopian Airlines Authority. This follows the Boeing 737 MAX 8 crash in Addis Ababa on Sunday. The Aviation Authority is currently hosting a three-day conference in Johannesburg on improving aviation safety, security and growth. CGTN's Jelisan Jamela has more.
The three-day conference offers the aviation industry here an opportunity to share ideas and possible solutions, to be proactive instead of reactive with incidences, accidents and threats. The annual gathering comes just a few days after the Ethiopian Airlines crash.
This unfortunate incident comes less than a month after the Travel24.com had published an article that indicated that there had been 0 airline jet hull losses or fatalities in Africa for the 3rd consecutive year. An incident-free airspace over the African continent, as alluded in the article, will only become a permanent reality when we get into the habit of engaging each other as regulators, manufacturers, and operators in an honest and robust manner about what could sometimes be uncomfortable topics. The bedrock of a sustainable air transport system that is much needed in our continent resides in high levels of aviation safety and security.
The Ethiopian Airlines accident prompted Comair Limited, a South Africa-based airline, to ground its Boeing 737 MAX aircraft.
It is not because Comair is indicating that there were safety concerns concerning the aircraft first, but of course they've taken a precautionary measures to say, and of course there's been a public outcry, to say if the similar type of an aircraft has been involved in an accident in less than 6 months, could we not, look at other means so that we don't find ourselves in a similar situation. At this point in time, we don't have an airliner who's using that aircraft, but of course there are expressions of interest which we are going to evaluate on a case-by-case basis.
South African aviation and tourism officials continue to emphasize that they will support the Ethiopian Airlines and will base future decisions on the investigation's outcomes.
We will support them as we should, and I think that until the outcome comes out, it is important that we look and wait for the outcomes, and then we can base things on decisions on that. But the reality is we must support and collaborate, and we've been very, very good as a continent with aviation, and we've been growing.
By the time it concludes on Friday, the conference is set to ensure that the aviation industry shares valuable insights and then, armed with new information and strategies, translate those into meaningful actions. Yuri Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron have co-chaired the One Planet Summit. The forum hopes to mobilize public and private actors to accelerate investments towards mitigating the effects of climate change and also find innovative solutions. The global goal is to transition to a low-carbon economy. President Kenyatta pledged that by 2022, Kenya aims to reach a minimum of 10% forest cover. The 150 countries represented have committed to 12 action points.
It is not just something for the Western world. Africa is key for this fight. Because in Africa you have the first direct impacts of climate change. I think about Lake Chad, for instance, and some other regions. And second, because what we propose, our commitments, these kind of pledges, are part of the solution.
The loss of forest cover exacerbates the impacts of climate change and natural hazards such as drought and fires, floods. Also undermines food, water, and livelihood security, with additional implications for poverty, conflicts, and human displacement. Investment in sustainable management and conservation of our forests is one of the most effective interventions to combat climate change in Kenya.
Earlier, CGTN's Wilkester Nyabwa was at the United Nations complex in Nairobi, speaking to Dr. Richard Munang, the Africa Regional Climate Change Coordinator for UN Environment. She started by asking him the significance of the One Planet Summit.
The One Planet is coming at a time where the science is unequivocal. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a report that came out before the end of last year, showed that the world was heading towards a 1.5 degree, and the UN Environment report, the emissions gap report, shows that if the world didn't increase the ambition to be able to ensure that we can be able to go below the 1.5 degree, we might be able to see catastrophic consequences around the world. And so the world needed to increase ambition fivefold. So the One Planet Summit discussion is actually how can collectively member states and also non-state actors like the private sector, civil society, and everyone, even individual citizens, carry out actions that can actually be able to keep the world away from dangerous climate change. The discussions center around resolutions that are looking at biodiversity laws, that are looking at land degradation, that are looking at marine litter and plastics, down to food loss and food waste. But when you look at all these, the centrality of all these aspects needs solutions in such a way that one aspect is not solved at the detriment of the other. If you take ecological degradation, you could not be able to produce in such a way that you are degrading the very land that you need for production tomorrow and years to come. But it's not only about production. You need to produce in a way that the ecosystem services, because we're speaking today, the food in which we depend on, 75% of that food is actually come as a result of pollinators. Pollinators are an ecosystem service. So if you are destroying ecosystems, you are actually destroying the food system. And so looking at how we can be able to protect the ecosystems, how we produce without accelerating land degradation, how we process without contributing to the emissions into the atmosphere, which will contribute to runaway climate change, means that the world needs to move towards renewable energy, utilizing approaches that can be able to add value to what is produced but without adding to emissions, and engaging each and everyone, state and non-state actors, because the challenges we face today are quite enormous. But this must be done not at the expense of the environment, because environmental action is a solution to the challenges that have been faced in infrastructure, in health, and even in education. And if you look across the world, there are already existing technologies, whether it is clean energy technology, solar technology, whether it is drip irrigation technology, solar powered irrigation, or whether it is even a mobile technology, they all do exist. But if you look at the environmental challenges, whether it is biodiversity loss or it is ecological degradation, as we're speaking today, costing the African continent $68 billion each and every year, or it is climate change, these technologies need to be utilized in such a way that they can be able to provide solutions to the challenges that the world is facing today, and especially so Africa. When you look at post-harvest losses, currently the continent is losing $48 billion, and there are 240 million citizens that are going to be hungry. To address these challenges, technology becomes quite very, very crucial, because as the result of post-harvest losses, as a result of inefficiency in the entire agro-value chain, so you will need technology to add value to what is produced to be able to ensure that at least you can reverse those post-harvest losses. And in this case, the technology needs to be clean energy, and more so solar dryers. Right here in Kenya, a group of youth have come up with an application, a mobile application called Ebagro Pamoja, which is connecting the dots and helping farmers to be able to access technology that is environmentally friendly, solar dryers, connecting farmers to markets, and also assessing inputs that can actually be able to work with the environment and not against the environment.
China's annual 2 sessions captured attention around the country and globally. In the Republic of Congo, Paul Soni Benga, the general director of the country's first privately owned station, DSTV, shared his thoughts on China's growing influence on the African continent.
This year, China's 2 sessions touched on a wide array of domestic and international issues. Paul Soni Benga kept track of all of them from the Republic of Congo, where he acts as a general director of digital radio television. The Belt and Road Initiative has helped China and Africa forge a growing partnership.
I see this initiative as a new model of cooperation that China offers to Africa and to the rest of the world. It leads to more openness, more shared prosperity, as well as a win-win partnership that is helping a number of countries, including those in Africa.
Since 1964, Congo and China have engaged in partnership.
China has advocated mutual respect since establishing diplomatic relations with the Republic of Congo in 1964. There has never been any interference in the internal affairs from either country. This is something that benefits the cooperation between China and Africa.
Domestically, China has set poverty alleviation as a top priority. President Xi Jinping put forth the target of creating a moderately prosperous society by 2020. Between 1981 and 2013, 850 million Chinese were lifted out of poverty. Paul visited China, where he saw the impact of this initiative.
I think the Chinese government deciding to fix the problem of poverty by 2020 is impressive. We often say we will do so, but we do nothing. In China, you've made the commitment. The fight against poverty will ensure China has access to food, quality education and free healthcare. We visited some rural areas in China where conditions were a bit rough, but we saw the transformation happening.
Through multilateralism, China has forged growing partnerships with many countries. Astatal, CGTN.
Let's now get you live pictures from the UK Parliament, where lawmakers have been voting on whether to push back the country's scheduled formal separation with the European Union. Let's listen in.
No, not now. We'll deal with point of order later. We now come to Amendment I. Mr. Hilary Benn to move the amendment formally.
Move formally.
Formally, thank you. I now call Lucy Powell to move formally her amendment to Amendment I. Move formally, thank you. The question is that the amendment to Amendment I be made. As many as are that have been and say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Division, clear the lobby.
Well, lawmakers have twice rejected Prime Minister Theresa May's proposed withdrawal agreement by significant margins. They complicated matters for her on Wednesday by passing a measure opposing any attempt to leave without an agreement. Theresa May remains in power but is seriously compromised. Many Conservatives back the anti-no-deal motion against her wishes, and several members of her cabinet declined to vote against it, leading to speculation she has lost control of her party and the process. She plans a third attempt at passing preferred agreement again. Well, let's get more on this, and I'm joined by Richard Bestick in London. Richard, the UK again is in uncharted territory. What's the latest from the country's parliament?
Well, it's, Beatrice, seems sometimes like we're in uncharted waters without a paddle. You're right, the Parliament is voting now on extending the deadline. Now, what I can tell you is that there is no possibility that Britain can meet its deadline March the 29th in just 15 days, even if Theresa May's deal were to miraculously come back. More on that in a minute. So what they're doing is voting on whether there will be a short extension, so say June the 30th. That is if when Theresa May brings back her EU plan to Parliament for a third time next Tuesday, MPs suddenly change their minds and vote in favour of it. It's got to be said that that's a pretty tough ask. The last time she put it before Parliament, her deal was rejected by 149 votes, the fourth biggest defeat for a sitting government in the history of British politics. And the time before that, back in January, it was defeated by 230 votes, the biggest ever defeat for a sitting government. So it is a very tough call. And if she fails to hit it, she might have to go the following day to the European Union summit in Brussels and say, look, can I have a longer term extension of Brexit so that we can reconsider our position? Now, the EU Commission President Donald Tusk has said today that they would consider that. They would say yes if Britain were to go away and they extend it by something in the region of 21 months. Now that's going to be difficult for the Brexiteers in Parliament, but that's the kind of demand that the European Union would make. Nearly a 2-year extension on Brexit. I don't know whether I'll be standing here still talking about Brexit at that time, but because it's an awfully long way ahead. But that's what's being demanded from the European Union, and that's what this vote about in Parliament tonight is all about.
Well, Richard Bestick joining us there from London with that update from Parliament. Thank you. Let's now bring you news from Nigeria, where rescue and recovery operations are now over at the site of a collapsed building in the country's commercial capital, Lagos. A number of school children were killed. The residential building, which also housed a private school, collapsed Wednesday morning at the Itafaji area. CGTN's Deji Badmus brings us the latest on that story.
It's all quiet at the site of the collapsed building. After working all through the previous night and recovering just one dead body, emergency officials say the rescue and recovery operation is now effectively over. I'm standing on what the emergency officials call ground zero, which is the very foundation of the building. Now, the problem is that the residents around here do not believe they've actually gotten to ground zero. They still believe some people are still trapped beneath this rubble. So what the emergency officials have decided to do is to remove the entire rubble, just to clear whatever doubt the people may have that some people may still be trapped beneath where I'm standing.
We've been directed to ensure that all of these rubbles are packed away from here, and then they want to see red sand all through, so as to show to the world over that yes, nobody is buried under anything here, and that we have finished everything we're doing. So as it is, our work continues.
And then the excavator comes alive, digging through the rubble and moving the debris. But nothing is found. A truck would later arrive to begin the evacuation of the rubble from the site. It's still not known what the final casualty figure over the incident is. The government is yet to release the official figure. But while all attention is focused on the collapsed building, some of the residents and the community who wouldn't want to appear on camera point to this house as another danger waiting to happen. No one lives in it at the moment, but the residents say it would soon be put up for rent and want the authorities to pull it down, saying it shows clear signs of distress. This area of the city has the highest number of building collapse in Lagos. Most of the buildings are either old or builders hardly conform to the city's building standards and codes. Like the collapsed one, many buildings here have been marked for demolition, but for inexplicable reasons, the demolition notices are hardly executed. But if nothing serious is done after this incident, it might not be too long before another building goes down in the community. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, like we mentioned earlier, China's annual 2 sessions captured attention around the country and globally. Egypt's former Assistant Foreign Minister, Dr. Hisham Zimaiti, also weighed in on the benefits of multilateralism and the Belt and Road Initiative.
In this case, in order to ensure the successful development of the world, the most important thing is to adhere to the trade rules formulated by international law and the WTO and to resolve those various trade differences through these rules, rather than by unilateral action or by one party imposing one wills on others. The era we are in, unilateralism, has ended. China and the AU have established a comprehensive strategic partnership today. This relationship between China and the AU with 55 member states is unprecedented. I'm very pleased to see more African countries joining the Belt and Road Initiative, including Senegal, the westernmost country in West Africa. This shows that all African countries hope to cooperate with China, expand their relationship with China, and benefit from more Chinese experience.
In Zimbabwe, doctors at the main referral hospital are demanding for less working hours. The doctors are also protesting a shortage of medicines and other critical supplies. Early this week, senior consultants at Parinyawata staged a demonstration and withdrew their services except for medical emergency. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya with the details.
The doctors insist this isn't a strike. But while they are in the wards, there isn't much they can do without the tools of their trade.
It's a very disappointing experience for somebody to just look at you and you tell them that we don't have drugs, we don't have the equipment. Initially they think you're lying, but when you see that we are persistently not treating them, they finally believe you.
Consultants at Parinyawata Hospital are trying to stretch the limited drugs they have as far as possible.
We've got some few drugs. But those drugs, we said, for us to be fair, let us use for emergency cases. Emergency cases, these are people who would actually die if we don't do anything to them. But there are many other people who come with chronic diseases which need operation, but we cannot do them. So we have got those few drugs for a week or 2 weeks, and we are concentrating on using them on people who have got dire emergencies.
On Wednesday, they held crunch talks with the Minister of Health and were given assurances that their grievances were being escalated to higher authorities. A long-running severe shortage of foreign currency has been blamed for the procurement challenges. However, frustrated doctors say there should be more efficient and transparent allocation of the little hard currency that is available.
We deserve probably the most because we are dealing with life and death.
The government has promised a lasting solution to the challenges affecting the strained health sector. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
After a 2-month campaign against militants in Libya's south, the National Army says it now controls most of its borders. It is now targeting the capital, Tripoli, where Islamist groups have expanded their reach. Here's Adel Mahroui with more.
In 2017, the Libyan National Army declared that they intend to march towards Tripoli, attempting to unite the divided nation. This week, military forces backed by Libya's eastern government controls at least 80% of the 1.9 million square kilometers country. LNA now stands few hundred kilometers away from the rival Western government in the Libyan capital.
I believe the solution in Libya is going to be primarily a military solution. When the fight for Benghazi began, some 370 soldiers were fighting against 15,000 terrorists. The people fought with them, and that was the foundation of the Libyan National Army. So it has a strong popular backing, even in many of the places which are still far from the LNA's control.
LNA's recent campaign to control the south and the southwestern borders appeared to take place with little resistance. Before entering any city, the army's leader Khalifa Haftar rallies for domestic support first, which has so far proven to be effective.
We are already hearing factions inside Tripoli declaring support for the LNA. The key to entering Tripoli is going to be El Zawiya city. If El Zawiya joins the LNA's territories within the coming days or weeks, Tripoli won't stand in the way for very long.
Haftar's progress on the ground has definitely empowered the Eastern Bloc political weight. It didn't, however, stop them from engaging in dialogues with the Western Bloc.
After 8 years in conflict, many Libyans are tired of the division and instability. That is maybe one of the reasons why the LNA is gradually becoming more popular. Despite its political differences with the Western Bloc, it is gradually becoming a pragmatic way out of this division. Still, it has many armed rivals in Tripoli who see its return as a restoration of Qaddafi's regime. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
To the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where a United Nations report says tribal massacres in the western part of the country may amount to crimes against humanity. The atrocities involved horrific attacks on women and children last December. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has more.
A United Nations probe in the Yumbi territory of Maindombe province found evidence of extended attacks. There were reports that 890 people had been killed and thousands displaced. This was a result of clashes between the Banunu and Batenda communities. Similar attacks were also reported in the neighboring Lukolela territory.
We've been able to verify fully that at least 535 men, women, and children were killed, and 111 others were injured in Yumbi town, Bongende village, and Nkolo 2 village.
Authorities said it was not possible to confirm the number of persons still missing. An estimated 19,000 people were displaced by the violence.
These figures are most likely an underestimate. The number of casualties is believed to be much higher, as the bodies of some who died are believed to have been thrown into the Congo River.
The violence was triggered by a dispute over the burial of a Banunu chief, reportedly on Batenda land.
the attacks, which were initially triggered by a dispute over the burial of a Banunu customary chief, followed strikingly similar patterns and were characterized by their extreme violence and speed, leaving little time for people to escape.
The attacks may consequently amount to crimes against humanity. No concrete proof was found to link the intercommunal attacks and elections that are due to take place at the end of this month.
So there are going to be elections held in this territory on the 31st of March. But of course, these people who've been displaced and who've had to flee across the border to the Republic of Congo will probably not be able to vote because of fears, ongoing fears of violence and really the impossibility for them to get back to their homes.
The United Nations has reiterated the importance of holding the perpetrators responsible for their actions. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Meanwhile, a senior Congolese official from the party of former President Joseph Kabila has dismissed the UN report that blames Kabila's government for failing to protect civilians in the western village of Yumbi. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
A UN investigation into killings that occurred in the DRC's western village of Yumbi last year found that at least 890 people were killed in ethnic clashes. The violence broke out between the Banunu and the Batende tribes over a dispute about the burial of one of the chiefs. The UN says the killings may amount to crimes against humanity. Tribal chiefs have been accused of ordering the killings. The UN also blames the government of former President Joseph Kabila for failing to protect its citizens. Kabila stepped down as president earlier this year. But the National Secretary of the DRC's former ruling party has dismissed the report.
When the UN has to go so far, then say the former government did nothing to protect the population, you must understand that behind that there is something else which is looking for by those who are willing to use the Yumbi tragedy for realizing their plan. The plan here is how to reach Kabila credibility.
The attackers are said to have destroyed close to 1,000 houses. More than 19,000 people were displaced by the conflict. The Congolese government consequently postponed elections in Yumbi to March this year. The DRC has been plagued by violence for decades. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Let's now go to Ramah Nyang for a look at the day's business news. Ramah.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Kenya and France signed deals worth over $2 billion. We'll have the details. And Egypt is on course to construct over 40,000 housing units in its new administrative capital by mid-2020.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. France and Kenya have signed infrastructure contracts worth over $2 billion. The contracts were signed as the French President Emmanuel Macron visited Kenya in order to boost trade with countries in East Africa. CGTN's Robert Nagila reports on the French President's visit.
The French president jetted into Kenya on Wednesday afternoon for the third and final leg of his Africa tour after visits to Djibouti and Ethiopia. Emmanuel Macron's visit to Kenya is the first ever by a French president, an indication of just how important France values its relationship with Kenya. On the agenda, trade, investments and climate change. France says it wants to maintain its status in Kenya as a long-term and credible economic partner.
Mr. President, your visit signals our shared commitment to foster our bilateral relations and engagements within the region in various ways which will deepen, expand, and strengthen our bonds of friendship and cooperation for the mutual benefit of our peoples.
France was part of your strategy in terms of energy, water, and different topics. But now what we want to do, especially with the delegation of companies, we are with our delegation, what we want to do is to be part of your new growth agenda.
The growth agenda Macron is referring to, known as Agenda 4, provides opportunities for investment in the manufacturing sector, affordable housing, universal healthcare, and food security. As part of that pledge, the two leaders witnessed the unveiling of Peugeot's 308 model, the Allure, which will now be assembled in Kenya. Two further models will follow suit later this year. Regional security was also discussed, with Macron promising closer cooperation.
We are deeply committed in working together with Kenya on different topics. First, security, counter-terrorism, and obviously the regional agenda. We discussed at length about the situation in the region. We work very well together on the situation, but we want to improve the cooperation.
France has also agreed to finance and build a light rail system connecting Nairobi's main airport and the city centre. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, in South Africa, a high-level ministerial meeting is planned to discuss the ramifications around Brexit, whatever form that might take. The British government has announced plans to introduce import duties on some 469 tariff lines that will be imposed for an interim period over the next 12 months.
There will be a new applied tariff regime towards the world at large if they leave the when they leave the European Union, which will apply zero duties on a whole range of products, but on some products, including automotives and including on beef, pork, lamb and poultry, they will apply duties. Those duties would mean that there would be higher cost trade for us.
After they leave the EU, it means that the current agreement that we have, which is the SADC-EU EPA, will not be applicable to the UK. So what we are trying to do is to negotiate a rollover agreement that will ensure that we still trade with the UK on the same terms. So what that will mean for South African traders would be that we will have new and additional market into the UK over and above what we have with the EU. So that is what this will mean for us.
On to Somalia. Yet again, it's received millions of dollars from the European Union. The latest funding round is worth over $90 million. That cash will be spent on improving local governance and supporting victims of climate change, among other matters. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello reports from the port city of Kismayo.
The signing ceremony took place in the port city of Kismayo in an event that was attended by international partners as well as Somali officials from both the central government and regional administrations. The $90 million project is expected to boost stability efforts in the country and promote local governance, inclusive economic opportunities, and protecting the most vulnerable in the society.
It's about delivering economic peace, governance dividends. This is what we want to do with this program. That service delivery becomes also a catalyst for greater governance and for greater security. And we want to see all the Somalis working together, not only in this program, but in every aspect of Somali life. This is our aspiration, and this is what we hope this program will contribute to.
The program will target projects in river areas, including regions near the capital, as well as road projects linking Galmudug and Puntland regions.
I think this program is critically important, but it has to be different from what it used to be. It doesn't have to be us spending money or donors supporting us. It must have an impact of the government's political agenda. It must support the security sector reform we are initiating. It must support the economic growth agenda that we're working on. It must support the social sector delivery that we have under our roadmaps. And it must support the leadership's vision in bringing the nation forward.
In recent months, the European Union has been providing direct funding to the Somali government. Last year, it channeled more than $116 million towards state building and provision of basic services. The funding is now expected to improve the lives of many in the country. Authorities have been urged to inject more funding into the country's fishing sector, a vital source of job creation for many young people in the country. And with one of the longest coastlines in mainland Africa, experts say that the fishing sector has the potential of playing an important role in the revival of Somalia's economy. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Kismayo, in southern Somalia.
One final story for you. Egypt's Minister of Housing, Essam Al-Ghazar, has announced that the ministry aims to complete the construction of over 40,000 housing units in the new administrative capital by June 2020. That project covers an area of about 1,000 acres. It's divided into about 9 neighborhoods, including villas and various service buildings. Yasser Kim visited the site. He filed this report.
The new capital is situated 90 kilometers east of Cairo. The location is making use of the vast uninhabited areas away from the densely populated Nile Bank cities. The whole project is 190,000 acres. The first phase under construction covers 40,000 acres at a cost of over $20 billion.
We are here at the residential area being constructed by the Ministry of Housing, which includes 700 buildings with more than 40,000 units inside. It should be ready by June 2020.
Engineer Mohammed Abdel Maqsood is in charge of overseeing the development work in the city.
The new capital is a smart city with the latest high-tech facilities. It also solves the housing problems in the highly condensed and congested Cairo. There are 9 districts, 3 of them so far are fully constructed by the Ministry of Housing. In the first neighborhood, we are constructing 700 buildings, 952 villas, and 2,000 mixed-use units, to total 24,000 units. The second neighborhood is called Garden City, inspired by architecture in Paris, and will include another 24,000 units. The third is the business district.
What are the details about linking the new capital to other cities and the transportation for the residents of the new capital?
There will be 3 high-quality forms of transportation. First is the electric train that will begin from the metro station in Cairo through the cities of Shuruk, Obul, and 10th of Ramadan to reach the new capital. The second is the monorail, which links Cairo with the new capital from the east. And the third is the high-speed train that will link the new capital all the way from the Mediterranean in the north to the west of Cairo at 6th October City and Shokna in the east, an impressive route.
It's a huge investment. Where will the funding come from?
This was an empty land in the desert. Once we built the basic infrastructure, there was a rush from investors and real estate developers to book pieces of land here. The areas for private sector in the first phase have been completely sold out, and its price has shot up. The revenue from these sales cover the expenses of the projects, so there is no burden at all on the state budget.
The government headquarters, ministry buildings, presidential palace, parliament, and many embassies will begin moving into the new capital in the second half of 2020. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour though. ESCOP estimated emissions from its coal-fired power plants killed just about 500 people a year. But an independent review estimates the actual tally is at least twice as high. We'll be digging into that report and the emissions problem in South Africa live from Johannesburg when we come back. See you at 1800 GMT. For now though, back to Beatrice.
Ramah, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. We'll be telling you what Madagascar is doing to contain a deadly outbreak of measles.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
to bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And now to the island nation of Madagascar, which has been battling to contain an outbreak of measles. The disease began 5 months ago and has killed at least 1,000 people. Children have been the most affected. CGTN's Tulisha Balala has the story.
Robertson Soa has had to walk for 5 hours to get to this health center. She carried her sick daughter on her back the whole way. The child has spots that have spread throughout her body. Madagascar has been battling to contain the outbreak of measles. The disease, which started in October, has killed at least 1,000 children and young adults. Children are more likely to contract measles if they suffer from poor nutrition.
It's a sign of malnutrition. 6.3 kilos at 2 years old. That's the weight you expect of a 3 or 4 month old child.
Robertson is a farm worker. She can't afford a wide variety of food for her daughter.
We eat rice always with the same broth. We give her food because she often asks for it, but it's always the same broth with rice because we don't have enough money.
Health facilities are far for those who live in the rural parts of the country. Some patients have to cross dangerous waters in search of health care.
Sometimes we can't cross the river because there are crocodiles and the water level rises.
Access is not the only issue. Health professionals have to overcome entrenched traditional beliefs.
You know zebu excrement? If you boil it and drink it, it can cure measles. So I don't think it is measles. If she had measles, the bark of the laza tree can also cure it.
The World Health Organization is leading a huge emergency vaccine program. The emergency response has vaccinated 2.2 million of the 26 million population so far.
We find it unacceptable. The children are dying of measles. It's not normal. We have a vaccine.
Measles is a highly contagious viral disease that can cause complications, including blindness and brain swelling. The outbreak in Madagascar has already infected over 80,000 people. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
In West Africa, Senegal has received a donation of medicine and medical equipment from the People's Republic of China. The donations were received by the National Hospital of Pikine, located in the suburbs of Dakar. Representatives from the Chinese embassy in Senegal, as well as the National Hospital and the 17th batch of China's medical team were at the ceremony. The medical material is worth around $91,000. Sino-Senegalese medical cooperation has lasted for 55 years now. Every 2 years, China sends a medical mission to Senegal's National Hospital of Pikine. Local doctors also have a chance to take part in training programs in China.
Every year, the Chinese government offers donations consisting of medicines and equipment for the hospital of Pikine to improve the conditions of the hospital. China will always accompany Senegal on its path of emergence and development. The Chinese government wants to contribute its efforts, helping our Senegalese friends.
This medication and equipment allow our medical practitioners to have the tools they need to provide better care.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Qatar and FIFA officials set to meet in Miami over planned World Cup host expansion.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Qatari officials will meet with FIFA's leadership in Miami on Friday with the possibility of expanding the 2022 World Cup top of the agenda. They'll deliberate whether the World Football governing body will add new host nations. FIFA's ruling council will also discuss a feasibility study looking at a possible 48-team rather than the planned 32-team tournament for 2022 in Qatar. Media reports have suggested that Oman and Kuwait are being considered as possible hosts for some of the games in an expanded tournament. The 2022 tournament is already set to be different, as it will take place in the European winter rather than its usual June-July summer slot.